Now, back in the day, when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, Adam used to do a little bit of digging and plant a few vegetables and keep a few sheep and that, and Eve would turn the wool into clothes, and they were all very happy and they had everything they needed. There weren't nobody what come along and said, "Thank you very much, that's mine, I'll have that, thank you very much, you can just keep enough to keep you going, so I can have more next time." There wasn't anybody like that. So the question I was going to ask was, when Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? Now, many of you here, you know me. For those that don't, my name is John Ball, and I stand for truth, justice, and the Word of God. Not necessarily in that order. As I look around me, all I can see is sadness and poverty. Not the sadness of the soul that us clerics usually bang on about before they decide how much we're going to charge you for saving your immortal soul. No, I'm talking real poverty. Poverty and oppression. Does anybody here not feel that poverty and oppression? You, sir. You poor beggar. When was the last time you had a square meal? I mean, look at you, all skin and bone. And you, madam, you obviously can't afford a decent coat for yourself. These are hard times indeed. They're hard for you, they're hard for me, they're hard for all of us. I don't know nobody what don't have hard times. But are we more oppressed than they were under the Israelites, under the Egyptians? Were they more oppressed than we are under the child King Richard? But the Israelites, they made themselves free, and they went to the land of milk and honey. And look at the fields, there was corn growing, but not for us. There's sheep, and there are kine in the meadows, but the wool, or the milk, or the meat, that ain't for us. Not for us, my friends. We work in those fields, but we can't have any of that. We can't buy the fruits of our labours. Are we free to pay a decent wage to our workers so that they can eat? No. We are told that we cannot earn or pay more than the pre-plague prices. We're not even allowed by law to give to the poor without fear of imprisonment. Is this the way of a merciful king? I tell you, my friends, it is not. It goes against the will of God. And have our church leaders stood up and cried out that this is not the will of God? I am ashamed to say that they have not. They've even imprisoned me for speaking out over this never-ending yoke that the king has put around our necks. And unless we stand up for ourselves, this yoke will only get heavier under the weight of more taxes. Another rise in the poll tax, 12 pence. Another family able to feed their children. Another tailor unable to pay his boy. Another tax to add to the yoke. And what's all this tax being spent on? What are we working so hard to pay for? I'll tell you what we're working so hard to pay for. The king is fighting another useless war in France. That's where the money's going, to France and into the crooked pockets of the official tax collectors. That's where, yes, going into the pockets of the tax collectors themselves. And how high up does this corruption go? As far as the bailiff, do you think? No, much higher than that, my friends. This stealing of taxes goes all the way up to the Chamberlain. Yes, and where's the money that should have been spent on repairing our roads and looking after our town's welfare? He's been putting it in his own pockets. That's where it's gone. Where else could it have gone, huh? Eh? He's even been fined for it. If one of us had done the same thing, we'd have been hung up by our necks before the day was out. And it appears, my friends, that what's good for the ruling class is too good for the likes of us. The child king plays war games in France while we work to pay twice the amount of taxes that are due. And still the king sends out men to harass us and beat us and imprison us and kill us for not paying him more than we can possibly afford. This is not God's will. We are born naked and naked we will die, but we must tolerate this slavery no longer. Why are those who call lords master over us? How have they deserved it? By what right do they keep us enslaved? just down the road there, over the river, by the river, near the sheep pens, I've got 400 people. They men and women. They come from the villages, they come from the farms, they come from the smithies, they come from the dairies, and we are going to march down to London, and on the way we're going to meet Jack Straw and his friends and his army, and Wat Tyler and his men, and together we are going to demand, not ask, that we be treated fairly. A good day's pay for a good day's work. That's all we want. It's time. It's time to say no more. It's time to pick up our staves and your axes and your scythes and yes, your hammers too. Are you with me? Yeah. Are you with me? I can't hear you. Are you with me? It's time to throw the yoke off from the necks and stand tall. Our fight is righteous and just. The Lord our God will give us the strength of David to oppose these wrongs, to gain back our dignity and say, this is the time. Join Wat Tyler and myself. We march, people of Colchester. We march to save our very souls from this corruption. Let me be your Moses, and together we will be victorious in our struggle. Are you with me, my friends? One more, are you with me? Yeah! Let us march!